Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Reese Rambles, episode 7, a very special Easter weekend edition. Not that there's anything special or Easter themed about it, but hey, I should at least mark the occasion and mention that. And I have some good news. Well, good news for me. I don't know if it's good news for you. I have a new microphone, which is the Rode NT USB Plus. Now, when I did my very first video on YouTube, which was the Atari 2600 mod that I did for Jason Bradbury, that well-known British tech journalist. And I think I mentioned that in a previous episode, actually. And at the time, I did a lot of research into microphones because I wasn't fully committed to appearing on camera. In that very first video, which I'll link in the usual places if you haven't seen that, if you haven't been with me since the very beginning, or if you just haven't seen it for a long time and want to refresh your memory. And it's a surprisingly good video, actually. I watched it again recently because there was something I wanted to sort of go back and check. And I was quite surprised that I think in my mind I'd kind of written it off as a very early attempt. But actually, it was actually surprisingly good, if I do say so myself. Less than a minute in and we're onto the big ego stuff already. What else would you expect from me? But yeah, anyway, check out that video that I did of the 2600. And I went and researched microphones at the time, and of course there were a lot of people recommending XLR mics. And if you're not familiar with that world, XLR is kind of the professional industry standard for connecting audio equipment to mixing desks and that kind of stuff. I've been in bands and stuff over the years, and I've been hooked up to a variety of XLR devices as a result. And I decided that was all far too much hassle, and I'd just buy a basic USB mic. I think literally everyone at the time was using the Blue Yeti, I think it's called. And there was another one that was like, I can't remember. But the Rode NT USB was relatively new at the time and was getting quite good reviews. And it's basically Rode are an Australian manufacturer of high-end microphones. And they make a microphone called the NT1, which is an XLR mic. And it's kind of one of the kind of staples of recording studios and that kind of stuff. It's a proper high-end mic. So they made a USB version where they basically built an audio interface into it and started targeting the YouTube and podcast kind of markets. And it was getting really good reviews. So I bought one and I used it. And I've been really, really happy with it ever since. And I've been using it for 3 years. I've used it for so much stuff. I've used it for work, Zoom meetings, and I've started using it again for the actual audio in my talking headshots, in my sort of to camera shots in my videos as well. I just kind of have it off to the side. You can actually see it in frame, although there's so much stuff going on that you probably tune it out. Because I bought the Rode Video mic, which is an on-camera shotgun mic, which actually sits on top of the camera, thinking that would be an improvement because a lot of people, like a lot of vloggers and people's videos who I watch, use those mics. And I thought, oh, their audio sounds good, so I guess it will work for me. But I think it just doesn't work particularly well in this specific environment. I think I need something that's quite close to my face because of the way that the sound kind of resonates in this room and that kind of stuff. And there's quite a short spell of videos that I made with that mic that when I go back and watch them now, I kind of think, oh yeah, you can kind of hear the reverberation and stuff a lot more kind of prominently than you can in my current videos. I'm sure it's the kind of thing that nobody notices, but to me, I like to kind of incrementally improve things. And I'm not a horrific critic of my own work. But sometimes I do look at stuff and think, oh, I'd like to be able to improve that aspect in the next video, I think. So, I'll pick on little things like the audio and that kind of stuff. And anyway, yeah, so I was watching some YouTube videos just the other day, just last week. And a thing came up about the Rode NT USB Plus, which I knew absolutely nothing about. I didn't realise they'd released it. I think it came out just before Christmas. And it was a review comparing it to the original, and the guy in the video was singing its praises and saying, oh, this is so much better and that's so much better and yada yada yada. So I went on and watched some more reviews, and they were all pretty universal, saying, oh, it's a really worthwhile upgrade. It's a really fantastic mic. Had examples sort of side by side of stuff that they'd recorded, and I thought, yeah, why not? I'll upgrade. It's been 3 years. This old mic's been really good to me. I'm sure the new one's going to be fantastic as well. So I got it. It's got a so Rode make something called the Rodecaster, which is a podcasting audio interface, which has got all kind of different kind of knobs and buttons and compressors and inputs for multiple mics and that kind of stuff. And there are two kind of aspects of that that sort of highly praised, which are the DSP, the digital signal processor that they've used, and the preamp. And they're both sort of very high quality stuff that they've kind of put together from their sort of pro audio experience and background. And what they've done is they've built that DSP and that preamp into the new version of the NT USB mic. So the NT USB Plus has a much higher quality preamp with a much higher sampling rate than the original mic. And it's also got this DSP, which has got various built-in features like a high-pass filter, and high-pass filter cuts out like low frequency, so it lets high frequencies pass. So any kind of very low-frequency rumbling or knocks or bangs or anything like that just don't get picked up by the mic. Or, well, they get picked up by the mic, but they get filtered out by the DSP. And it has a compressor, and obviously a compressor reduces the dynamic range of a recording, so the loudest sounds are made quieter and the quieter sounds are made louder. It's got something called the Aural Exciter, I think it's called. Yes, the Aural Exciter. I'm not quite sure what that does. It's supposed to make spoken word sound more kind of dynamic and more interesting. I had a play with that and didn't really notice any kind of difference, so perhaps it just doesn't work on my voice, or perhaps in my particular environment. And it has an effect called Big Bottom. Big Bottom. And the Aural Exciter, I know. And what Big Bottom does, as you can probably imagine, is it boosts like the low end of stuff. And obviously when I first got this mic, so the annoying thing is that there's no like actual physical buttons or display or anything on the mic itself. So to enable and disable this stuff and kind of configure it, you have to do it through the Rode apps. And I already have Rode Central because I use their wireless Go mics sometimes for like recording on location and that kind of stuff. And that's the software that you need to kind of get the recordings off of those mics and kind of configure them and all that side of things. And it turns out that it supports this new one as well, and you can go in there and you can disable and enable all of these various different features. So when I first got it, I just turned everything on and I sat down and I recorded some stuff, and it sounded awful. It sounded really, really awful. There's a noise gate as well. That's the other thing I haven't mentioned. So what a noise gate does is it cuts out like quieter background sounds and stuff as well. And the reason I mention that is because that's the one effect that I have actually left turned on now, because that seemed to be the only one that kind of made a positive improvement and didn't make everything sound horrific. But of course, there are different features for different situations and stuff. For example, if I was a guest on a podcast, I might turn the compressor on. So if I move too far away from the mic or I move too close to the mic, everything comes through at a consistent volume. Obviously, for recording YouTube videos, you kind of do all of that stuff in post-production anyway. And so you'd want your recording to be kind of fairly kind of raw and fairly kind of unprocessed. But I still think it's a worthwhile upgrade. Even though I'll predominantly be using it for YouTube videos, I still think it's a worthwhile upgrade for the higher end preamp, and a higher end analog to digital converter and that kind of stuff as well. And just as a nice treat for me for my 3 years of service at the coalface of YouTube, this is all starting to sound like an advert, isn't it? Which I promise it isn't. They haven't paid me to say any of this. I've been a very, very happy customer of theirs. I own quite a few of their mics, and I do think they're generally very good. But yeah, just wanted to mention that. And that was paid for by my patrons. Now, I know that's a controversial subject, and I'm not going to sit here and I don't want to use this as a platform to push my Patreon. You know, to me, it's a bonus, and it's not something that I rely on for my income, thankfully. And it just means that I have that extra bit of money coming in that I can use to, I can at least use it as a justification to kind of buy these bits and bobs for the channel. Like I said, I like to improve things and like to sort of make small incremental improvements to my setup here and my equipment. And I hope that results in, I hope they're not just toys for me to play with, and that does result in kind of a better end result for my viewers. You know, I have quite sort of lofty aspirations when it comes to sort of filmmaking and YouTube and that kind of stuff. And you know, I want stuff to be as good as it can be. Ultimately, for me, it's not about churning out as many videos as possible. It's about the process of creating videos. And of course, if the end result is better, then that's great. That means I've done a better job, and I'm much more kind of satisfied with that, if that makes sense. It's not just kind of a product that's intended for sort of consumption and a disposable thing to be forgotten about, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? I think that makes sense. And so, yeah, and the reason I mention my Patreon is not because I want to draw attention to it and because I want to ask you to sign up for it, because, any contributions are very gratefully received and very much appreciated. But ultimately, the fact that people out there are watching my stuff and appreciating it is more than thanks enough, I think. But the reason that I mention it is because yesterday I had 2 new people sign up. I do occasionally get people signing up. Most of my patrons are actually really sort of long term. I've got quite a few people who've been with me since the very beginning, which is really fantastic. And the reason I set it up in the first place was because people were asking me to, essentially. I had a couple of people say, I want to sort of help you out and donate some money to the channel. What's your PayPal address, kind of thing? And, my PayPal address is kind of linked to my own real life legal identity. And as you can imagine, Reese isn't a very common name, and my surname isn't particularly, my surname is very uncommon. And if you search for my full name, you will basically just find me and all of my personal information. I'm a company director. My home address is out there on public record, and all of my kind of finances and stuff as well. So it's not the kind of thing, it's not some big secret or anything, but it's not the kind of thing that I want to sort of just put out there as kind of public knowledge. And I hope people understand. I hope people understand where I'm coming from with that. So, a couple of people sort of asked how they could help out, and I set up a coffee and got some donations on there. Is it coffee or is it Ko-fi or something like that? I think the default message is thanks for buying me a coffee, and it's spelt Kofi, so it would make sense that it would be coffee rather than... Anyway, I digress. I set that up, and I set up Patreon, and literally within a day or so of setting it up, I had 2 or 3 people. If you go back to the videos that I was releasing around that time, you can kind of see the end credits with those kind of 3 or 4 people on there. And I think at least a couple of those people are actually still with me, which is I really appreciate that. It's really cool that either they're that happy with what I'm doing, or they've just forgotten that I exist, and that they've got that money going out every month, which I suppose is a possibility. And so yeah. Going back to that conversation yesterday, I had 2 new people sign up, Catriona and Darren. Thank you very much for your support. Both quite active members of the community, and people I kind of chatted to before, and who support other people and are active in other Discords as well. So I was familiar with them. And they both showed up in my Discord, and there was kind of a conversation about sort of the nature of Patreon and who they support and why and that kind of stuff. And it's great that we're all kind of on the same page with that. I myself, Patreon was it was actually a net loss for me for quite a while, just because I was supporting so many different people as well. And everyone from sort of very small channels that are kind of friends of mine that I just wanted to give that bit of encouragement to much bigger channels who've been kind of entertaining me for years, and who I thought, this is their income, and they've provided a lot of kind of value to me. So it's only fair that I would give something back. I appreciate these big channels make a lot of money from ad revenue and stuff like that as well, but hey, it's everyone's individual choice of who they support and all that kind of stuff. And also Neil from RMC, I was actually there at the weekend. He had a board game night in the cave and a Patreon day. And when he first moved from his old studio setup into his new setup, which he calls the Cave, which is a public attraction, it's open to the public. It's like a computer museum, and they now have an on-site arcade and stuff as well. And the whole retro collective, as they call it, is kind of in the process of expanding and adding new stuff. When he first moved from his old place, it had some problems with his landlord, and essentially the landlord decided that they wanted to apply to turn his old studio into a flat without telling him. And he saw the notice and just thought, no, I need to get out and I need to get into a bigger place. And that was when he kind of decided to sort of follow his dream of opening a public space. And that was when I increased my patronage to him, because I thought, no, this is going to be a really cool thing that he's building here, and I like this guy, and I trust him to do a good job of it and just kind of give back to the community, because he's never given me any impression that he would do anything other than that. And sure enough, it's now finished, and well, I mean, it's not finished. These things are always ongoing, but it's now at the point where it's open to the public, and it's a really fantastic space. I've been there quite a few times. And that's just an example of kind of the project that I think is kind of worth supporting. And yeah, so in my case, obviously the way that this conversation went, I think there are the types of projects where you're kind of you're paying that money in exchange for something, and you're getting something back, and that's the reason that you're paying for it. Whether that be in the form of regular videos, regular content, or whether that be, like I say, kind of the longer term goal of building something. It's no different to kind of donating a chunk of money and saying, "Here you go, I believe in what you're doing," but you're doing that over kind of a longer time span. But for some people, it's just a case of, if you think about it, some of these people, if you saw them, if you were in the queue at Starbucks for a coffee, and you turned around and one of your favourite YouTubers was stood behind you, and you got chatting to them about, thanks for everything that you've done, all the entertainment that you've put out over the years, and all the kind of useful educational stuff. Let me pay for your coffee, kind of thing. I think it's kind of a similar arrangement to that, isn't it? It's like they don't need you to buy that; they can afford to buy that. They were going to buy that anyway, and but it's just kind of just a little bit of appreciation and a little bit of encouragement, and just a little kind of token of that, really. We're not talking huge amounts of money with Patreon, but of course, once you have a number of people signed up to it, it does all add up, and it's nice. And so that brings me around to why I do it in my own sort of personal specific case, why I continue to have it. I don't push it heavily at all. I thank my patrons at the end of my videos, but that's pretty much it as far as promoting it is concerned. I don't even post links on social media saying, this is what people have got in early access at the moment, and that kind of thing. Nothing against people who do that. I guess I just worry a little bit about the kind of the backlash against that, which is sad, because I should be able to at least let people know that these things exist. But hey, the kind of people that are generous to support stuff like that do generally seek it out actively and find it anyway. And by not shouting about it, you don't kind of make yourself a target for the kind of people that get triggered by its very existence and get offended at it. But in my personal case, I think I've started this sentence quite a few times and wandered off onto other stuff. But yeah, in my personal case, as far as I'm concerned, the fact that I have patrons is probably the biggest driving force behind me releasing videos, if that makes sense. So, of course, I make videos because I enjoy the process of making them, and it's a hobby of mine, and it's something that I combine with my other hobby of retro computing and electronics and retro gaming and that kind of stuff, because I find that combining the two kind of enhances both of them, if that makes sense. Obviously, filming stuff does add a lot of extra overhead, and it can sort of hold projects up and that kind of thing. But ultimately, I enjoy the process, and that's why I do it. But the fact that there are people who like what I'm doing enough to give me some money every month really does add kind of an extra, I don't want to say pressure, because I don't want it to sound like it's a burden or something like that, or like I feel obliged. But it's something that I do have kind of in the back of my mind when I'm making those videos. I'm thinking, there are people out there who like this stuff enough that they want to go above and beyond a little bit. And it's like, I need to deliver for them. I need to make a good product for them and kind of entertain them and inform them and educate them and all of that kind of stuff. And I think a big part of it is, I kind of jokingly said yesterday when this conversation came up that if it wasn't for patrons, I'd probably never get anything done. And that's perhaps a little bit of an exaggeration. But it's not far from the truth. Ultimately, you put stuff out on YouTube, and yeah, you get the same people commenting on the videos, and it's great to have that community there. Loads of regular names coming up again and again, and it's great to see those people. And I do try to sort of respond to those people and kind of like their comments and try to reply when and where I can. Obviously, this kind of goes back to what I was saying before in the previous one. But ultimately, if I don't release a video, I don't know. Are those people? Are they going to miss it? Are they sat there sort of waiting, thinking, when's Reese's next video going to come out? Or am I just kind of lost in a sea of the endless kind of disposable content that they consume. I'm sure it's a kind of a mixture of the two. Everybody's different. Everyone sort of watches and consumes media and watches their entertainment differently. But as far as patrons are concerned, it's kind of like, right, okay, these people have chosen, they've gone out of their way to kind of seek out my Patreon, and they've signed up for it. They've gone through the process to kind of fill in their payment details and click the button and pick a tier and all that kind of stuff. And I really need to do something to kind of keep these people entertained. And that's kind of how I see it in my mind. And I need that. I really do need that kind of motivation to keep putting stuff out. Because if it wasn't for that, I'd still be making videos, but I would just, they'd take forever, and I'd sit and spend forever polishing them, getting them absolutely perfect, and then I'd release them. And because I wasn't releasing stuff very regularly, YouTube wouldn't promote it as much, and because I wouldn't have that initial kind of boost on them from my sort of supporters watching them, I don't think the channel would be nearly as successful as it is. And that's something that a lot of people don't kind of talk about. There are some bigger creators out there who do rely on Patreon for their income, and it's certainly not all of them, and it's not even the majority of them. But I think I have had some in the past that I've kind of signed up for and thought, oh, I really like this person's videos, and they've been entertaining me for years. I'll give a little bit back, because I know YouTube's ad revenue isn't brilliant from personal experience. And I'll sign up to their Patreon, and that'll be it. Literally, I won't hear anything from them, no kind of interaction from them. Perhaps they'll let me see a video a few hours or sort of a day before it's released, but that's literally it. And they don't engage with their community in any way, and you start to feel like you're kind of just a line on a spreadsheet, really, and that they take the whole thing for granted. It's like, oh yeah, I've got this income coming from here, and I've got that income coming from there, and they forget that. One of those kind of pools of money that's kind of coming their way every month is from real people who've, genuinely like them and genuinely want to give them something. And it's kind of sad that you can forget that, and that you can take that for granted. So, that's the reason. Obviously, that's the reason I'm very active on my own Discord. That's the reason my patrons automatically get added to my Discord. And obviously, I do engage with the wider community around my channel, but they're kind of my, they're my people, they're my OGs. They're the people that keep me going and kind of keep me motivated to do this. Again, I don't say all of this because I want to try and persuade people to sign up or guilt trip people or whatever. I just think it's something that people don't really talk about in the world of YouTube. Quite what it means to them and kind of why they do it. There's certainly a lot of talk on the negative side, saying, "Oh, look at this person constantly pushing their Patreon. They just see people as a blank check, so they can go out and buy more toys to play with." And I like to think that that's not the case. But I also mentioned one thing that I did mention, talking about ad revenue and about stuff that people don't really talk about. I just released a new solar update. I've tried to do it as kind of a self-contained thing, just covering my entire setup. I'm really happy with the way that my solar setup works, and it generates enough power for me to run my entire channel. I can run on my old computers and consoles and stuff on it, and I run my laptop on it that I do my editing on. Use it to charge my camera batteries and run my LED lights and everything else. It's a surprisingly capable system for its size. And I wanted to do a complete tour kind of end to end from the panels to the kind of power end of it, just to explain how the whole thing works as kind of an integrated thing. And one thing that I kind of very quietly and very quickly, and I don't make a big fanfare about it, one thing that I give away towards the end of that video is how much money my viral solar video made. So the very first one that I put out, which now has just over 800,000 views. And I guess the point is that the whole point that I was getting at was that I didn't put this system together to save money. I think it would be very foolish of anyone to try and build their own small-scale, off-grid DIY solar power setup to try and save money on their electricity bill. It's never going to pay for itself. I've always been very upfront about that. But you would be surprised the amount of people that still kind of come along saying, what are you doing this for? It's a waste of money. It's going to take forever to pay for itself. It's like, well, if I go out and buy an old PC or an old console or something, people don't go to you and say, what a waste of money. Well, that's never going to pay for itself. It's like, you've bought something that you use and that kind of gives you joy and gives you some content for your YouTube channel, But when it comes to solar, people are constantly approaching it from this angle. I think that's because of the way that it's kind of been sold to us. It's like, buy this solar system. It's only going to take 10 years to pay for itself. I know that's massively come down in recent years as well. You're getting rooftop solar systems that are paying for themselves in like 3 or 4 years. And so people look at literally anything solar and they kind of apply that same kind of thought process to it. And they're like, why would you build this? It's never going to pay for itself. It's like, well, it's paid for itself in kind of the educational value that it's given me. And it's also kind of paid for itself, in the entertainment value. And, I just like tinkering with this stuff, But yeah, kind of as the ultimate kind of middle finger to those people, I just thought I'd put up on screen, well, this is how much ad revenue it's made from that video, which is £4,800 in the past 8 months, which is a lot of money, and it more than covers the cost of that system, of course. And of course, I've spent that money on. I've actually kind of put all of that money back into the channel and bought stuff that I've used for content and equipment and that kind of stuff, because kind of YouTube is kind of the thing that I predominantly spend money on, really. It's kind of predominantly my hobby. So anyone who turns around and says to me, what a waste of money, I can point to that figure and say, well, evidently it wasn't. But I got incredibly lucky, and I don't want to come across as being kind of smug about that, because that's certainly not the intention. It's just someone approaches me with a smug attitude, I can throw that back at them. But there you go. And is that an accurate representation? Would anyone else releasing a video getting those kind of views get that kind of money? I don't think so. I think it was kind of a perfect storm of kind of ideal conditions. As far as YouTube advertising is concerned, there's kind of this bidding system. It's all based on the kind of Google AdWords system, and people trying to sell specific things can enter like a maximum bid. That they submit their ads to the platform, and they can submit a maximum bid to show that advert to people. And of course, if you've got multiple people targeting the same target audience, and they're putting in higher and higher bids to try and get their ads shown. If someone wants to pay, 5p to show their ad to someone, then that's a ridiculous amount of money to pay. But of course, what happened was that I released that initial video, and then the very next day, the government here in the UK decided to massively increase the energy price cap. And we now in the UK are paying the highest price for energy in the whole of Europe, which of course is entirely a result of the war in Ukraine and all of that, and OPEC conspiring against us, and absolutely nothing to do with any other kind of political events. But this isn't a political podcast, so let's not go down that route. But yeah, the government put the energy price cap up. All of us, it was coming into winter. All of a sudden, everyone was panicking. I'm not going to be able to afford to heat my house in the winter. Searches for solar stuff massively went through the roof, and people were looking for kind of lower cost DIY solutions to that problem, because a full rooftop solar setup is thousands of pounds, and not everyone has that kind of money sitting around just to kind of throw at that at very short notice. And of course, waiting lists and stuff as well. If you'd signed up in kind of August for a rooftop solar install, it wouldn't have gone in until like 6 months later. So I know people who kind of signed up at the time and have had stuff. I think one guy is literally having it go in this month, and I had that conversation with him when that video was new. So I mean, that's what the waiting list has been like. So yeah, I think the reason that video firstly did so massively well as far as views were concerned, and secondly did well as far as the ad revenue was concerned, is just because the government announced that all of a sudden there was a massive increase in interest in solar, and not only were people searching for videos about solar, but all of the solar companies were desperate to try and jump on that opportunity to sell people stuff as well. So they were all bidding quite high for the ads. So if you see another video out there that's got those kind of views, has it made that kind of money? I don't know. I guess it's impossible to tell unless people are kind of open about this stuff and talk about it. But there you go. Like I say, I don't say that to brag. I just say it because I like to be transparent with stuff, and I like that information to be out there. So that's the new microphone, the Rode NT USB Plus. Not sponsored, but I can't even tell you if I'm really happy with it yet, because this is the first thing I've kind of done properly with it. You'll have to let me know if you think it sounds good. That's the Patreon stuff, and me kind of talking about the whole story behind that, why I set it up and why I do it, why I continue to do it, and why it's kind of a really big motivating factor for me to kind of carry on doing what I do. And that's the solar stuff and the kind of freak events that led to that video making a silly amount of money for no apparent reason. I think that's one of the most coherent rambles I've done so far. I hope you all continue to enjoy your Easter weekend. I'm probably about to head out and drink a nice beer in the garden, and maybe even fire up the barbecue, depending on what time of day this is. But thank you all very much for listening, and I'll hopefully see you all again next week. Oh, and subscribe to Control Alt Reese as well. Bye!